So the third question is, what are the benefits to grant support and what are the downsides? I think that there are so many things in both of those piles. So the benefits to grant support are numerous, that you get to engage in high quality, rigorous inquiry that is a sort of protected space to really just have challenging opportunities to think and resolve issues. I can't think of other fields outside of academia where it's okay to solve problems and not come up with answers that are satisfactory and go back to the drawing board over and over and over again to test and find data. I really love that about research, and grants offer you protected space for that. So when as a function of being 100% on grants, I don't have to teach unless I want to. Really, I can spend all my time working on these big problems, these challenging issues, and that's really cool. I like that. I also like that grant writing offers tremendous flexibility in work-life balance, right? So because I'm not teaching, I don't have to be in a classroom at a certain time, and I can flex my time around my needs so long as I'm, getting my work done. So that means sometimes I work from 7 p.m. to midnight, and that's okay. And sometimes it means that there are studies that have needs and requirements that otherwise I wouldn't entertain while teaching, right? Like, so most studies operate on calendar years. That means that when the school year starts, we have all hands on deck getting studies launched and out the door. Grant writing also typically offers great opportunities for dissemination, where you get to meet and interact with other people who do really cool things. I really enjoy learning about sort of the periphery of the work that I do. So again, I am focused typically on early language and literacy assessment and development, but at conferences, sometimes I attend things that are sort of outside of that space because I really am curious about sort of where natural collaboration could happen and what there is that's new in other fields that I can learn from that might apply to my field. So what else? I also really like the collaborative nature of grant space. So I've been really fortunate to work with teams who collectively take on the challenges of whatever the grant's work scope is and hash it out together. We aren't particularly siloed. I love that. I love getting to work with my colleagues across the nation in that way. The challenges to grant writing are, or to grants beyond writing even, are that they're typically money that's coming from an agency that has some requirements, and so there's a lot of, well, not a lot, but different agencies have different hoops to jump through around how the money is spent and what you're doing. And sometimes on the surface it looks like a lot of money, but once you get through indirect costs and the scope of your work, it can be tight. And monitoring budgets is a necessary condition of getting grants, but certainly not super fun. So I don't love that, but it's satisfying when you can close out a grant and hit it right on the nose. I don't love that grants expend themselves and then you have to find new grants, right? Back to the soft money funding cycle, that if you're 100% grant funded, then that means that as one ends, you have to be prepared to fill that hole with something else. I think it's probably much more amenable to think about grants in the context of something like a tenure track faculty position or a hard funded position where you can say, 40% of my time is on grant work, and then have flexibility to figure out how to fill that, which is much different than filling 100% of your time. So that can be challenging relative to the position. I don't like that research has such a gulf of space between research and practice. So I don't love that a lot of our funding agencies give researchers across the nation a significant amount of money to engage in really cool and novel ideas that are pitched in a way that they're made to serve a need for young students or K-12 students. But then after the grants are done, those tools and resources don't always reach the hands of the users they are intended for. And so I imagine that there are a lot of amazing interventions or assessments or tools that just never got to field, and that's disappointing to me that we have invested so much money in things that people sometimes don't ever get to see or use. And so I wish for a place that I wish for a conversation space that would work harder to facilitate moving products from research space to applied practice. Other things I like and dislike about downsides and upsides. The other downsides I think are that you build relationships and you have to be mindful about how to nurture those when the grant is over. So some of the strongest relationships that I've made in my research community are through grant work, and it's sad when your team disbands, but at the same time, finding new ways to work together in other entities can be really fruitful and lead to new opportunities. So that's both a pro and a con, I guess. And then otherwise, I think just at like a more global level, grant writing is a little bit depressing in that we write and write and write and write, and then the hit rates are rather low. So it can be discouraging and feel like the ideas that we're pitching are not necessarily well received. But I think if I've learned anything, it's around grant writing, it's to consider the feedback and revise and resubmit, and that persistence really does pay off. Maybe over the long time, maybe it takes a couple years, but if it's a good idea and people hear that, I think that there's a high chance of funding somewhere in the future.